Originating from Houston, Texas, the fastest growing city in the world, MJWJ.
And welcome once again back to Black Greek Speak. This is Friday. Thank God. It's Friday. So we have to make sure that we end this week on a positive note because we've been kind of deep. So
and your Rocky music was a great start.
Was the Rocky music?
That was it. That was definitely how you bring in Friday.
You know, I wanted to
going strong.
Yeah, something inspirational. Listen. On this end of the day, even though there was some conversations that we've been having that I did not want to necessarily have, I did not. I try to get away from certain conversations that I just think at a fundamental level are just superficial, childish, and at some levels just media hype.
Okay.
You know,
all right.
I just,
you had a few of those this week?
Yeah, you know, so, but we can't seem to get away from this conversation about these two football players. I don't.
Martin.
Yes,
Martin.
Jonathan Martin
Martin.
Incognito, right?
Incognito, yes.
And
the bully.
Yeah, the bully.
The alleged bully.
And we can't seem to get away from that. People are asking me about.
We try.
Yeah, you know, I did. Trust me, I try. You know, even when it comes to politics, when it comes to entertainment, I try to get away from just the mundane conversations that, you know, I was a journalist for about 12 years, so I recognize what journalism is about, and I just did not want to perpetuate that.
Right.
But what I did realize is I couldn't escape it. So I said, okay, we'll talk about it on Black Greek Speak, but I'm going to do my little twist on this, right? And so
a little academic extra.
Yeah, a little academic extra to have us think about what this conversation and what I think in a way that is going to fashion us to do something positive. Just hearing about two millionaires who are bullying each other really doesn't do much for me, right? You know, these are grown men. I get the conversation, and yes, grown men can be bullied, you know, but at a fundamental kind of like a just everyday walking around level, I don't know about other people, but me, I'm like, so what, you know? So. You know,
you want to explore the so what a little.
Yeah, I want to
deeper.
explore the so what a little bit more, right? So with that, I said, okay, well, let's talk about really what this really conversation is really about, and this is about the way men seem to interact and the way we're defining manhood and masculinity, right? And I said, okay, well, that's a conversation that I can have, and I think that's a great conversation because when we start talking about masculinity, part of the conversation that I think, and that's why, of course, linked up here with me again is my sister Dina, because I think whenever we talk about men, we need to talk about men in relation to women, right? Because there are some perspectives that
there's a variety of viewpoints.
Right.
We're all learning and growing together.
Amen.
Can I say that nicely?
Yeah, we're learning, growing. We're kumbaya. You know, but I think that there are some real things, because one of the things that I push back on is, as we're talking about, and I'm a feminist. I acknowledge that I'm a feminist. But I think there's a difference as a feminist, a male feminist. I am not looking to do away with masculinity. I'm looking to do away with patriarchy. So that's a very different way. Mm-hmm. But I think what we're doing is we're constructing black boys, particularly boys in general, but black boys in particular, in a way that I think is destructive. And once again, I say this almost every show, and I'm going to keep on saying it until the numbers go down. There's a reason why we have over 1 million African-American men that are incarcerated or engaged in the criminal justice system. Of the 2.1 million that are there, 1.1 million of them are African-American men, African-American, and of that, 90% of that number is African-American men. And we have to really engage that conversation. And I think part of that conversation is the way we construct maleness in this country, and particularly the way black maleness and manhood and masculinity are defined in our country. And so So with that, I did as I do, and I started reaching out. And one of the persons that I reached out to is a good friend of mine. His name is Marquise Fountain. Marquise is not only a member of Omega Psi Phi, but he is also a former NFL football player.
Oh,
so
nice.
He
like a 1-2 punch.
Yeah,
on the conversation.
Yeah, but he got out quickly because he recognized that there was a problem with that. So.
What's going on, Mark?
What's going on there, Marquise? I really appreciate it. And also, I invited Lamani Viney. This is a brother of Kappa Alpha Psi who I hold in great respect and in high regard because, one, he is the national director for our Kappa League, our God Right program, which is the program that mentors young men, particularly African-American men, but,
And when you say our program, you're referring to?
Kappa Alpha Psi. Okay. I always forget there are other organizations. It's nine. Can
we have a little light?
Yeah, it's nine. It's nine of us. It's nine. I'm working on it. I forget. I get it. But I wanted Brother Viney to come because not only is he an educator, but he's a mentor, and he leads this. He leads this national program for Kappa, and I think that he offers a very unique perspective that I want to engage in that. So I want to say, Brother Viney, I appreciate you linking up with us as well tonight.
Hey, no problem, Brother Smith. No problem at all.
So, Marquise, I want to start with you. You're the former football player. So,
okay.
Here's the conversation. I want to ask you first two questions, but the first question that I just really want to ask you, what do you think about this kind of incognito situation going on in the locker room? Have you given that any conversation or thought at all?
To be honest, man, I kind of still look at it from the aspect of, actually being a teammate or, me being on the team with him and being his teammate because it is certain, it's certain ethics and it's certain, it is a different lifestyle in that locker room. It is, guys do handle each other, I would say, a lot irregular from me and you it would in the regular day, man. I think it should have been handled a different way as far as him notifying, notifying the authorities. But it's certain rules that you need to follow, man. There's certain rules that I believe that you have to follow in every class, and I just think the way he did it. Now I do not justify Cognito calling him the N-word and all that. That's way beyond, it's more into that. You just never know the whole story, especially when it's coming from an athletic locker room and then going into the news.
Okay, well, help me with this, because people are going to listen, and all of us haven't been, I was an athlete in college. I must admit, I was an athlete in college who petitioned for college football players to lose their scholarships because I feel like it was a waste of money, but that was just kind of my whole kind of way of thinking. I did. They wasn't going to classes, and at my school, they had all these white women going to their classes for them. I was like, look, I'm broke, and I'm running track, and we couldn't get none. So that was kind of my whole thing. But with that, I'm trying to keep it light. But with that, so help us understand this locker room mentality that you're talking about. Because when I listen to this kind of conversation, when I hear this locker room mentality, in a lot of ways, I think about the fraternity. I do. I think about the way fraternity men kind of interact with each other. But I also think about the way pledging and hazing gets mixed into the mingle of that. And it seems to be kind of like a protected domain, like you gotta, you know what I'm saying?
I mean, but gangs are no different.
Yeah, and gang activity. So help me understand what this locker room mentality is supposed to do, Marquise. What is it?
First of all, it's a very masculine, tough environment. You got guys that are the best of what they do, all in one space. So everybody has the man guard up, and everybody wants to portray or show their teammate, hey, I'm here and this is what I am, and I'm solid, I'm masculine, and it's just like the norm of an athlete, and I just think, like I said, I don't justify going that far as him calling him, all out of his name and doing some of the things, saying that he's going to kill him and all that, but I do think it's very well a set, like code, it's a certain, if you want to say like an ethnic code, you go by, and it's not whether you white, it's not whether you black, it's just, I do know that is true.
So, I guess my question, because I'm not only kind of subject to, not having all of the facts about football, but you're a football player and you've been, and I'm talking about Martin, the gentleman.
Right.
You're a football player, you played in college, you played in high school. Are the rules the same at each level? Because I think part of our lack of empathy comes from the fact that you're a professional. You've done this. I mean, isn't
sound like children?
This how it's always been?
Marquise, let me hold on, Marquise. Let me do this. Let me take a station break because you're going to go into a conversation that I know is going to. Dina's a female here, and she ain't going to understand some of this masculine talk that you're talking about. Listen, if you want to join the conversation, feel free to do so. You can like us also on Facebook by liking us at Black Greek Speak with Marlon Smith, or you can dial in at 800-970-8716. We'll be right back talking about this masculine thing on Black Greek Speak.
Spanning the globe. MJWJ, Global Radio Network.
And you're back with Black Greek Speak with Marlon Smith. Listen, once again, if you want to like us and join the conversation, you can do that by liking us on Facebook with Black Greek Speak at 800-970-8716, or you can also dial in at, and talk to us as well on Facebook. So if you want to do that, you can feel free. Listen, I want to get back to Marquise. Marquise, Dina asked a question about, okay, is this kind of, where's the progression of this? Because they look at, these are professional athletes. Is this a kind of a culture that starts in high school, elementary school, and little league? I mean, when does this start? What's up with it? When does it mature, and does it continue to just perpetuate itself as you get older? Marquise, are you there? Maybe let me go to Levine and let me see if Brother Viney, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, Brother Viney, I'm going to let me push that over to you until Marquise. We may have some technical difficulties. I want to find out, though, Brother Viney, you're mentoring young boys, right? And here's this kind of construction about black masculinity and what Marquise was talking about, what happens in a locker room. Well, and for me, I'm thinking to myself, that's a very real kind of place, right? If this is part of how we're going to define manhood, right? Because football player, that's really...
It's ingrained in who we are.
Yeah, that's kind of an identity structure. So my question is, how do you address that, or how do you perceive addressing that as not only an educator, but as a mentor for young boys?
In terms of the idea of what are we talking about? What it is to be a man?
Yes, an idea of what it means to be a man.
I think, it's interesting that you raised this because I believe the whole definition of manhood is by far one of the most difficult aspects to define. And I think that's part of where we have this difficulty in terms of our identification, in terms of the variety of rites of passage. And I'll just give you just a real quick example of how deep this goes. If you have a mother that's raising a child in the inner city or wherever, and let's say that child is 7, that child can be called or stated, "You're the man of the house."
Right.
And let's take a think. Let's look at that impact just right there, because words do matter. To say to a 7-year-old, "You are now the man of the house," then that could be said somewhere in the same community to a 13-year-old, "You're the man of the house," and then someone could be going through a program and they could be told, "Now you're a man" at 17 or 18. So the fundamental question is, okay, well, what is that definition? And I think now we have to look at, well, what is it meant to be a man? What is it that we tell a man to do? And or what is it that we tell males? Let me move from man to male.
Okay.
Part of the difficulty there is, if one look at why we have these problems, from an early age, we set very different rules. The first thing is how we manage emotions. Men are told very early, young boys are told very early on, suck it up, no crying, don't show no emotion, right?
Right.
And so if we think about that in terms of things that are told in lore of rites of passage programs, football, track, whatever, what are we told on athletes, on the gridiron, right? Suck it up, no crying. If you're hurt, play. If you're injured, okay, don't play. Toughen up. Wasn't that what was told Incognito to do?
Right.
Martin?
Right.
Toughen him up. But So we're blaming incognito, but wait a second here. That's what mothers, fathers, the community start telling young males at a very early age, as early as 3 or 4. You bump, oh, mommy, daddy, I hurt myself. Suck it up. We don't do that with our daughters. With our daughters, it's come here, let me see. Let me take care of that. Our boys, it's like, up, rub it off, suck it up, stop crying. Even to the fact that we get embarrassed or angered if our young boys get overly emotional or cry for a long time. And so let's look at that damage we're doing, because some people may think, well, that's natural. That's what we're supposed to do with boys. Here's the problem. At a very early age, we're telling them to do something that is actually not human nature, which is to hold in one's emotion, to bury it down deep. If you think of that like a pipe and you're putting steam in and there's no release valve, all of a sudden, at some point in time, it's going to crack. And that's why, if I can just jump up a little further here, when you tell a young man, suck it up, show no emotion, toughen up, and we also, and I'm going to get to the issue of failure in a second, because that plays a big role in this, but when we're doing all this, this is why all of a sudden we have our Columbine. This is why all of a sudden we have people who, young men that look great on the outside, all of a sudden, day later, you find out they've committed suicide. This is how we have issues like the Sandy Hook incident. This is how we have our soldiers, our great soldiers that are coming home, and nobody wants to talk about this, but the rate of suicide amongst soldiers coming home.
Right.
This is why we have NFL players, part of it, in terms of their committing a suicide or dealing with these issues. Because we've been told as men for all of our lives to suck in our emotions, do not express, do not cry, do not lean on anyone's shoulders.
But
your
Brother
partner
Vonnie,
as a female, yes, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I don't want to interrupt, but you said so much there, and part of the thing that I think that we kind of need to ask is we say this thing about, in a general kind of way, that I'm hearing you say is we tell our men, our young boys this, right? And I'm wondering, okay, first of all, who is the we? And secondly, when did we start doing this and why? And that's the thing that I think we sometimes don't do. I want to talk about that on the other side. Listen, I know people want to join the conversation. You can do so by liking us on Facebook at Black Greek Speak. You can also dial in at 800-970-8716. We'll be right back with Lamani Viney and Dina Gray Hughes on here on Black Greek Speak with Marlon Smith in one moment.
You're listening to MJWJ Global Radio Network, the Feel Good Talk Radio Network. Talk Radio Network.
And you're back with Black Greek Speak. Remember, you can like us on Facebook at Black Greek Speak with Marlon Smith, or you can dial us at 800-970-8716 if you want to be a part of the discussion. Linked up with me once again is Lamani Viney and Dina Hughes. Brother Viney, you kind of made the conversation about black boys, particularly, but men, young boys are constructed in a way that is different than females. And my question to you when we left was, who is the we that is doing this, and when did we start, and kind of like why do you think it is happening? I mean, we're not just doing it; we must be doing it for a reason, or whoever the we is that is doing it for a reason. And I'm curious, what do you think? Who the we is, and when did we start this?
I think we is everyone. I mean, I think this crosses gender. This crosses ethnicity. This crosses socio-demographics, socioeconomic. And not only does it cross all of that, you can really go back, in my opinion, I think you can go back to the dawn of time. I mean, I know everyone likes to keep things modernized when we talk about these things as if they're new phenomena. But if you really look at it, you can trace a lot of these issues or a lot of these traditions of what manhood is, or how we define manhood. You can go back before, you can go back into ancient Africa. You can go back into times of Mali, Songhai, big nations such as that, and even prior to that. You can look in Japan during the times of feudalism. You can look during the Persian Empire and the Greek Roman Empire. I mean, pick a spot, pick a place, choose it, and you will find that culture of a rites of passage of defining manhood there. And amongst pretty much every single culture is this idea of man controlling one's emotion, sucking it up, being able to take on adversity, where the measurement of a man was the type of adversity that he was able to take on.
Well, here's I mean, I get all that. If it is that ingrained, my question becomes then: if it's that ingrained, if it is a social construct that is that ingrained, that we can kind of point to all of these different civilizations in epic periods of time. The question for me then is, how do you change something that seems, if it's that ingrained, then it is a part of a natural kind of way in which we exist now. We do so without even thinking. So what becomes our steps of breaking that down? And the reason why I say that is because I recognize, for instance, in the prison that I run, that when I talk to men, one of the things that is very interesting of the men in my prison is the way they define manhood. And one of the ways that I found that was very interesting, the way they define their manhood, is they use words like leader and provider. For all of their concepts of themselves as men was always in relation to how they are in relation to other people. And usually that relationship is always a power dynamic, right? It's always hierarchical. And so I asked them, I said, well, let's problematize that, right? How would you define yourself if you were not attached to someone else, right? Like if there was no wife, because most of these conversations about their definitions of manhood are always linked to women, right? So even if it's about being a father, men in prison, and I understand the concept, they've been in prison for a while. But when you ask them to kind of define themselves without being in relationship to a hierarchical structure over someone else, they can't find anything. And so my question for you, Brother Mine, is, particularly as you're working with young boys, because I'm thinking, okay, we got to at least start with the boys, right? We got to at least not.
Right.
How do we help young boys do that if they are going to the football field or the basketball field, or if they're hanging out in the classroom, right? How do we do that? Because that seems to me that you want to create a definition of manhood that socially is not affirming what you're wanting to suggest we need to do.
Okay, so the first thing here is, well, why is all this happening? I want to go to, because there's three parts to it.
Okay.
The first thing you stated was, okay, well, if it's been so ingrained throughout all this, what is the difference now? There's a fundamental difference, and that is the rate of single-parent households, with men not being in there. And I say that in my own opinion because even though me and my father have a great relationship, my mother raised me. There's a fundamental difference between how I was raised and groomed being under my mother as I am raising my son. So when you talk about that fundamental difference, that having not just having a man, but a man that is guiding, molding, crafting another young boy is a significant component to all of it. So that's number one. Number two is we're using the term manhood a lot, right? Right. I think that's part of the other issue that we have, because we even still, if you talk about young boys, we're talking about manhood. Here's where I think the part of the issue is. Where is boyhood at? We're defining everything through manhood, but where's boyhood at? My son, I don't want him to be a man now. He's 8 years old. I want him to be a boy. And I think what we need to do is, instead of first and foremost working with our young boys in terms of what it is to be a man, we need to put in place what it means to be a boy.
Wow.
I think which leads us to the third part is we are trying to grow them up faster than what they are. And that's why we're seeing also a lot of these issues, because we're trying to put responsibilities, we're trying to have them be able to filter their emotions in a way that physiologically, mentally, and developmentally, they are not prepared for. It's almost like trying to give trigonometry to a 2-year-old. No matter what you do, it's not going to work. So why are we putting these emotional responsibilities that you have to naturally grow into over age and time onto individuals that at the age are really not built for that. And that's what we tend to be in dialogue. So as we're talking about manhood, what does it mean to be a man? No. What does it mean to be a boy?
Wow.
What does it mean to be an adolescent? What does it mean to be a teenager?
Wow, that's a great statement. I want Dina to kind of come into this conversation. I'm asking you because Brother Viney makes a statement about, one of the things is we understand in the African American community, a lot of women are raising our
Correct.
sons these days, and the absenteeism of fathers, at least in the household, right? There's usually a man somewhere, but the absenteeism of fathers, particularly in the household, and so how do you address that? What are you thinking about when you hear what he's saying about this?
I think the most profound piece was the boyhood
Right.
component, and I agree. I mean, our boys in our schools and even in some of our organizations and programs that we do have set up, we're not really allowing them to be boys. They are actually being groomed
to be
young men, to be responsible, to have all these meet all these markers that are established for them. And I also hear the piece about it being something that we can look over the span of time and see that manipulation from one stage to another. We've all done it, men and women both. But for me, it's not even so much a definition of manhood or even boyhood, but I think it gets back to what we kind of started with, which was masculinity.
Right.
And what is that? Because I think defining masculinity opens the door to manhood, boyhood, gay, straight.
I knew you was going to bring that in there. And, Brother Viney, I'm
not a man, so I can't.
Brother Viney, I'm going to ask you this. So let me kind of put that in there, because I remember when I was doing some postgraduate work, I taught kindergarten for 3 years, and one of the things that used to disturb me was I used to have mothers would come to my classroom to pick up their sons, and if they saw their son sitting at a table with a little girl, they would oftentimes make this statement like, "Oh, is that his little girlfriend?" And I'm like, "No, he don't have no girlfriend up in here. He's 5 years old. There's no girlfriends, boyfriends." And my reasoning behind that was, one, you wouldn't come to that classroom if it was your daughter and ask the question, "Is that her little boyfriend sitting there?" I never had mothers or fathers come and picking up their daughters and making that statement.
Women do it a lot.
Yeah, and the second thing that was problematic for me when they did that is that you're sexualizing him already at 5 and 6 years of age. And Brother Viney, you make that statement about boyhood, but don't you think part of what this issue is that we're dealing with, even in the locker room, even as we start talking about these kind of like hyper masculine spaces that we can find ourselves in, isn't part of this issue really about sexuality though? Let's just be honest. Isn't it about we equate masculinity to manhood, maybe bypassing boyhood, but as a means of trying to escape this idea of femininity or gay or something like that. Don't you think that's just part of what the issue is, and we have to wrestle with that issue at the same time?
I think that has been a big growing issue. I think with the dawn of social media, and I think with the dawn of the acceptance of, or greater acceptance now, unlike in the 80s or even early 90s, the greater acceptance of, gay, lesbian, transgender, and as that becomes more of the social norm, meaning just a part of the general community, there is that part of parents, I'm going to say both mothers and fathers, that are becoming more overprotective or wanting to push, okay, let's make sure you like girls, right?
Right.
So yeah, that does exist because of those of us that are older, we came up in the old school way of thinking you have to be straight, and we also came up in the culture where being anything less than straight, you were demonized. You remember New York City in the late 80s,
right?
Right. If you were gay and you left the village, you were in trouble. Physically, from violence.
Right.
That's the type of environment that we all came up with. Now, it's totally new. It's more accepting. But those of us that came up in that, I think there's still that sense of overprotection about children, subconsciously and consciously for some, to say, I don't want my child to be gay, I don't want them to be lesbian, I don't want them to be transgender, so I'm going to make sure, oh yeah, he has to have a girlfriend. You know, and there's more of that pressure on boys than girls, but it still exists, you know, so that's absolutely a dynamic, and I think social media and where we are today has made that more of a dynamic.
You know, I think one of the pieces, and I agree with you about, you know, what we want to put on our children, the coats we want them to wear, right? Mm-hmm. We don't recognize why we're wanting them to wear this particular coat. I want you to wear this coat because it gets really cold at this particular time. Translate. If something happened to me traumatically, and we have to look at what happens to our children sexually, the molestation, the abuse, we have to look at that. And a lot of that plays into a self-definition as well as what you're now putting on a child to wear, about what is a man, what a man does, what a man don't do, but where is it really coming from? And I think and I'm at an age where I have teen children. I do have to look every once in a while and say, okay, am I putting them in a position that I just want them to be in because it's right, because something happened, you know, and I'm translating it, and I don't want it to happen again. But we have to consider not just a feeling about something, but really where is it coming from?
Where is it coming from? Okay, let's examine the where.
For men, that's a big deal.
Let's examine the where, because I think there are two places that I see. For instance, particularly when I was in education, in public education, one, with so many single mothers, I ran into this idea that and mothers used to flock to my classroom with their sons. It was amazing because I was only male teacher in the classroom. Right. So, but I think one of the issues that I found where it was coming from was single mothers were feeling guilty for being single mothers, and they did not want the idea of their son being gay to be a problem because there was no man physically in that life, right? So it's kind of a guilt of being
because a mother didn't have much guidance either,
right? And maybe so.
Bad messaging on both counts.
Maybe so. But then that other issue is where we kind of started this conversation, which is that bullying aspect, right? Because when boys leave out the home, they're still interacting with other boys, right? And so, if it's a very real possibility that when I go into gendered spaces where boys are, like, you know, male gendered spaces, there's a very real possibility that I can be threatened physically, bullying, right? So I think that there's a dynamic there. And so if we're doing that, Brother Vonnie, I'm going to kind of ask you the question. If we know that those are two very real places where that may come from, where that may be the places where some of that tension exists, what do we do to address that very real tension in the minds of parents, both mothers and fathers, but just as people who are raising sons?
So I want to make sure I'm clear. The tension of homosexuality or the potential of homosexuality in your children?
Yes, the potential of failing mothers, single mothers feeling like they failed with the possibility of homosexual sons, as well as the potential of bullying young boys who don't exercise a sense of hyper-masculinity. Does it make sense? Let me say that.
Yeah.
Let me readdress that. Let me readdress. That's a long question. How do we deal with mothers who feel guilty because there's no fathers in the household? And I don't want to, because there's no father in the household, have a gay son, because that may be my fault. How do we have that conversation with a single mother?
Well, I think I've had to have that conversation with a couple of parents in the Catholic League program that we run. Just general broad conversation. The fact of the matter is, you have to tell them that how you raise them does not impact what their sexual preference is. And I know that this is where we get into, controversy here in terms of, well, what determines whether someone is gay or straight. Right. And that's above my pay grade. But, what I try to say to them is that, listen, you have to do, what's best. You have to do what's best. What I do say, though, is that you cannot be overprotective, of your son. You have to let them go out and to experience the world. I had a conversation with a parent. Interestingly enough, we're talking about this. I had a conversation with a parent today regarding letting her son come on out and do more activities with us. And the reason why she didn't, because she said, well, he's not mature enough to come out. And I said, no, you have to let him come out. I hope I'm answering that
you are.
Right.
You are. I want to come back to that on the other side of this break and kind of go there a little bit, dwell there just a little bit longer. We'll be right back. We're here with Black Greek Speak With on MJWJ Global Talk Radio.
Spanning the globe. MJWJ Global Radio Network.
Or you can dial in at 800-970-8716. Once again, Brother Viney, you were making the point that you've had parents who talk to you about this kind of issue about sexuality and of their sons and bringing them around more. I guess what I want to ask you is, how do we separate this idea of masculinity from sexuality, or is it, or do you think that they're paired together and there's no way to talk about masculinity without talking about sexuality?
I think that's tough. No, you can talk about masculinity because I think one of the key is we have to be clear. Yes, there is a difference in raising and being a boy and being raised and being a girl and being raised. I think we've lost. I think in the sense of trying to make things equitable in society, we've blurred the lines that can't be blurred, which is there is a fundamental difference in how you do raise a boy versus raising a young girl.
You're gonna have all these you're gonna have these women jump up on my phone, hit me on Facebook because you're gonna say some madness like that. I see all these feminist scholars at my university already.
Listen, and this is what I will say this to them. I am a father of an 8-year-old boy, and I have a 3-year-old daughter. I have 2 sisters, and I was raised by a mother. So, I'm not trying to be confrontational. But what I am saying is that there is an absolute difference. Let's be sure we're being clear here, though.
Right.
I am not talking about raise your daughter to be in the kitchen. That is not what I'm talking about.
Exactly.
My wife owns her own business, which makes twice as much as I do. So I am in no way talking about it from that end. I am talking about it indeed from a biological end. I am talking about it from a physiological end, that there is indeed a fundamental difference between how you raise a boy and how you raise a girl. Okay? But we've blurred the lines and say, okay, we can raise all the kids the same way. Absolutely not. And so part of that is understanding, yes, there is masculinity. There is, in terms of father to son, the natural way in which I communicate with my son is fundamentally different than the way my wife communicates with my son or that I communicate with my daughter. It is fundamentally different how I communicate working with boys. And even in my classroom as a teacher, it is different in terms of how I communicate with boys, teenage boys versus teenage girls. That does not mean, let's not confuse being different to one being better than the other.
I agree with
being
that.
Unequal.
No, I agree with you. I do agree with you. I think in this age we have somehow we don't like the idea of difference, and I think that is the problem, right? I think that's fundamentally the problem. I agree with you because I've raised sons and I raised daughters, and I've had sisters and I have brothers, and there is just fundamental. And if we could start with that fundamental acceptance of that, right?
And I think it's
right.
It goes also to, and I wanted to ask Brother Viney more about his program because it goes to what should we be. How should we be focusing our attention, whether it's collectively as a society, as it's the chicks on the side doing the ride or die thing? What what is some of the next steps that we're infusing? Because the one thing I'm not hearing is, young men, and I have a young man in my house, and I am the emotional flood, right? So if he walks in, comes in the house, he moves around a little bit, comes over to me, and I don't say anything to him because I know, this is a man time. He comes over and he says, I talked to Cynthia today. That's big, right? That's huge. That's an expression of, and I'm reading it. I know what it means. But I have to make sure that he has space to say that he likes Cynthia as much as he has space to, complain about a teacher or, fight the next battle on the battlefield. So how do you get us to really engage young men, not just in one context? Because apparently, I don't know what's going on with Martin, but that whole football piece lacks, it lacks comprehension. All you hear and see is testosterone. You're not really getting what's really happening. So how do what are the next steps to get our young boys to engage their full self? Be testosterone-y. Do it. I mean, run the field, do the plays, hit the mark.
We're gonna put that in the dictionary.
Testosterone.
You're opening up there's a broader context here, but I'm going to try to keep it in the scope of what you're talking about because you're dead on. What I will say is the first thing is something that you're doing, I think, which is excellent with your son, is you're giving your son a voice, a platform of expression. And we confuse expression with being emotional, right? So what's happening is that, and I see it in schools where a young man tries to express himself and he's shut down. And think about when we talk about young men. I mean, I'll give you one. Terrell Owens or any of the outspoken. Remember the Des Bryant situation?
Right.
In terms of, this is perfect here. Remember the Des Bryant situation on the sideline and how demonstrative he was?
Right.
And everybody was like, oh, my gosh, he's the worst thing in the world. And so they listened to it, right? Well, when they called it race, they were dead on. That was a race issue because what has happened through history is young black men's voices are shunned. Don't speak up.
Right.
Don't express. Don't have that voice, right? And so now we have society has done that. And in some cases, if we're honest, in a single-parent household, I've seen mothers do it, shut their young men down when they're trying to express themselves. I cringe sometimes when I'm in the supermarket and I see a young boy trying to say something, and the mother says, "Shut that, blink up."
Wow.
Now,
well, we need
to
we need to take another break. I know we keep on going. We're going to have to figure out a way to do that. Listen, if you want to join the conversation, you can always continue the dialogue on Black Greek Speak with Marlon Smith on Facebook or dial in at 800-970-8716. We'll be right back in one moment.
You're listening to MJWJ, Global Radio Network, the Feel-Good Talk Radio Network. The Feel-Good Talk Radio Network.
And you're back with Black Greek Speak with Marlon Smith. Brother Viney, I just kind of want to give you this last word as we get ready to wrap up. This hour goes by so quickly. If we have this issue where this so ingrained issue, I guess the question is, what do you want people to take away? What do you want to, you're the national director. I want to say to people, I want to say that also. Please tell people how they can sign up to be in Capital League as well. But where do we go from here? What do you see we need to do from here as we start working with young boys?
So let's go to a couple of things. The first thing is, I think what we were talking about right before the break is important. One, we all have to create activities, whether that give our young men a platform of expression. Voice is a very powerful thing. Voice is what builds confidence. Voice is what builds self-identity. Voice is what builds awareness and thinking. That sense of, what do you think? Just being able to speak. I tell my kids all the time, speak loud to the world. So the aspect of having voice and not shutting them down, allowing expression is key. Now, when you allow expression, and conversation, it is there in which we can teach our young men how to manage their emotions. Mind you what I've just said here, not shut down your emotions.
Right.
Manage them, okay? So it starts with the platform of expression. And what that also means now that we as adults have to stop lecturing. I have been guilty of it. A lot of us are guilty of it. I cringe now when I look at mentoring organizations and brothers or individuals come in, and a lot of times it's like, yeah, I want to speak to the kids. That's a big problem right there. So I've seen many a times you go into programs or you get speakers, and that's that person speaking and talking to young men and young boys, but there's no allowing them to speak.
Wow.
Okay?
Right.
And so right then and there, what we're saying is what we have to say is far more important than what they have to express.
Right.
Okay? So that platform of expression is key. Listening is key. Listening with intention is key. And then I think the third thing is we cannot get caught up in the paranoia of hypersexuality. We cannot get caught up in the paranoia of, oh, my boy's going to turn out to be gay. Oh, I don't want my boy to be a punk. Oh, right. and putting in fictitious aspects of manhood. I'm going to say this also for those that have younger children. But you have to begin to build back in boyhood. You cannot rush them. Boyhood, allowing them to go out and play, allowing them to play with toys, allowing them don't put them in adult conversation. If there's issues between
adults,
boyfriend or baby father,
let it be an adult conversation.
Other room, you know what I mean? Take
Exactly.
us to the other room. We have to get them out of seeing adult situations. And if that means building a little bit of a bubble so they can have a childhood, guess what? Then build a little bit of that bubble.
I like
so
that.
I like
that.
In those programs.
I like that, brother.
You know?
I appreciate you coming on. You have so much you got to say. We got to bring you back, Dina. Of course, you know I appreciate you being here.
Hey, Brother Smith, before I go, just you asked me about if anybody's interested in our program, and I'll post this online. But you can go to www.natlkappaleague.org, and that's where most of our Kappa League programs. You can reach us through there. You can also reach me at L Viney, that's L as in Larry, Viney, Viney, at NEP, Nancy Edward Paul, Guide Right, RIGHT.com. That's L Viney at NEPGuideRight.com.
I appreciate that, Brother Viney. I really do. I appreciate Marquise Fountain, and I appreciate you all really linking up with me. Remember what we always say here on Black Greek Speak is that everyone really can't do everything, but if everybody did something, then everything really would get done. Thank you for linking up with me. We'll see you again next week on Black Greek Speak.
Take care.